Thanks for being here with me. It's so much happening out there. Normally, in recent months, we've gone to Alan Bonner for his expertise in emergency management, but we sometimes overlook the fact that on top of his expertise with emergencies, he's also good at communications and governance. And it's more that we're turning to him today for. Alan Bonner joins me here now. He joins us here regularly on the show at Alan Bonner Communications Management. He's also a member of the Institute of Public Administration of Canada. And Alan, I guess it's more the latter that we're here to talk with you about today, because you've been taking a look at the WE scandal, and you've seen all the same stories that we have, but you're actually coming at it from that administration angle. When you see this, you're not just looking at a story of ethical problems with the government or bad communications or bad planning. You're also seeing a broader problem within the public service. Why did we need to bring in the WE organization in the first place?
Well, that's exactly my question, and I think that there's a long, deep historical perspective on that. You are absolutely right that this story is being covered, reasonably well by journalism and by the opposition parties. There's an ethical matter to it. There's an accounting and reporting mechanism problem with it. But for almost 50 years in public administration, we have been devolving certain responsibilities of government to quasi-government, non-governmental organizations, service providers, a range of organizations. So one of the great examples in Canada is the Children's Aid Society in Ontario, which is an arm's length, pretty independent entity with its own board, which means it can raise money, which means it has probably enough independence to write an op-ed piece and promote child welfare. Every other province has that happen within a ministry. Well, you know as well as I do that an assistant deputy minister or deputy minister can't write an op-ed piece, can't make a speech. It kind of has to remain somewhat anonymous. So that one works. Most of the others are of dubious benefit, chiefly because the governments used to give block funding to an organization and say, go to it, provide this service. Now we have annual or short-term contracts for service, and you're under the thumb of a bureaucrat who wants to know how you're doing things and this, that, and the other. One of the outcomes is that governments don't actually know where some of this money is going, and I've worked on these files, and you see that they've spent money on a youth employment program or a tourist program or what have you. And I'll sometimes say, well, what did you actually do? Well, we're not sure. We don't deliver that. So I think this WE scandal is part of that. Why did we need this charity to funnel taxpayers' money into deserving organizations and projects? It may have been a wonderful goal, but why did we need that intermediary step? I first started hearing this when I was in public admin 35 years ago. We are partnering with the private sector. We do transfers to the private sector. And I said, what are we, money launderers here? If government is qualified and needed to provide a service, it should do so. There's nothing in private sector experience that makes that particular manager more qualified to deliver those things. So that's the big rant, Matt, and I hope it makes some sense.
No, I think it absolutely does. I mean, anyone who has dealt with the federal government knows, and this is going to sound like it's a partisan lament. I honestly don't mean it this way, Alan. I just mean this as someone who, like you, has some experience in big institutions. You have more than I do, for sure. I'm not claiming otherwise. But if you have any experience navigating a bureaucracy, navigating a big institution, you know that the bigger it gets and the more tasks assigned to it, the harder it gets to do any of them well. And this is, you can have a really small, efficient, bureaucratic or organizational economic unit. It is designed to do one thing. It has the appropriate number of people in place to do that thing, and it is really, really good at doing that one thing. We see those kinds of organizations all across society, small shops like a dry cleaner or a restaurant. It is really, really good at cleaning your clothes, and it is really, really good at serving meals. But the government is almost the opposite of one of those small, niche, focused economic units. And the bigger these things get, the harder it gets to administer them. And right now, and I say this with sympathy, Alan, I honestly feel this way. The federal government has been dealing with an unprecedented crisis. I can understand the appeal for them of passing on something like this grant program to another institution, probably because the government was bureaucratically exhausted after the first few months of the crisis. What's baffling to me is how they didn't bother talking to an ethics lawyer first, which is weird for a guy with multiple prior ethics breaches. But I think I understand what they were trying to do, and they screwed it up.
Well, fair enough. But I would also say that while your comments about bureaucracy are valid, there are two organizations within the federal public service that I think are huge exceptions to that rule. One is the Canadian military, and the other is the mid to senior levels in the diplomatic corps. These people have tremendous work ethics. They work all the time. Ambassadors think nothing of flying 6 hours to a new location, attending a conference, 6 more hours to Ottawa. So those are really can-do people. And if you gave an assistant deputy minister or someone from global affairs the task of doing this, my guess is it would have got done at least as efficiently. And I don't think anybody would have held a public rally in an arena and featured the prime minister and his family and a cabinet minister. I mean, that just would have set off such alarm bells. It would have been unbelievable.
Alan, what is it about those institutions you'd mentioned, the military and the diplomatic corps? Is there anything about them organizationally or culturally that we could learn and apply more broadly across the public service? I mean, I'm hoping we're not going to send an infantry battalion to run a student grants program. So how do you capture the kind of expertise that you're talking about and apply it more broadly throughout the government?
Well, in fairness, we also can't spend the amount of money on training an individual that they do in the military. These people have a lot of training because it's life and death. I've been on most of the Canadian bases, and one time a base commander said, well, he had everybody from the base Petawawa drive down to Ottawa within about 4 hours. I said, my goodness, how did you do that? And he said, well, that's what we train to do. We know how to do that. Nobody ever forgets how to drive CF-18s in Cold Lake. Nobody forgets how to drive a tank or a Jeep or an armored personnel carrier. Whereas in the private sector, you often find, how did we do that last time? And you're kind of reinventing the wheel. So one thing, it's training. The other thing, it's life and death in the military. Very serious matter. They're charged with protecting their fellow citizens. And with the diplomats, I think this goes all the way back to pre-World War II, where those people joined the Foreign Service in order to save the world. There were huge issues, existential issues, the Cold War, nuclear proliferation. And those people were on a mission. The CETA people, what they affectionately are called the beard and sandal set, the CETA people were trying to save the world in a different way, in a more feely-touchy way. But the diplomatic corps were engaged in fundamental issues of existential issues. At the Canada Revenue Agency, or Health Canada, that's not exactly the same sort of imperative.
No, I shouldn't laugh, Alan. I'm not laughing at what you just said there, but it just struck me as a very polite way of describing large segments of bureaucracy in this country. I think I think what you just said was absolutely right, and I think it was also very, very polite. We got about a minute left here. What do you expect to see in terms of what comes out of this? I mean, you're applying a different lens to this. Do you think we're going to kind of continue to see this bubbling along? Will this remain mostly a political scandal, or do you think we'll actually get to the point where we take that deeper look?
Well, look what happened with Gomery. Gomery was Prime Minister Paul Martin committing political suicide on national television by saying he wanted to get to the bottom of it. And what the outflow of Gomery was a rigor mortis in the government's ability to let a contract for even $5,000 to do something. This has been documented in the journal Canadian Public Admin, where they will ask you how many pencils you're planning on using during the life of this project. Imagine if that was done by Sirius Satellite Radio. Well, Mr. Gurney, just list how many pencils you're going to need, and how many memory chips for your program, and are you going to wear out a chair? I mean, this would be ridiculous. So what I hope doesn't happen is a massive new layer of bureaucracy on the government's ability to give $5,000 to a student program. We've got to be more efficient at this, in my view.
Do not disagree with you at all. Well said. Alan, thanks for your time as always. It was nice to talk to you about something else other than a global catastrophe. So we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, that was fun. And honorable mention to the post office. They seem to get stuff done too.
You know what? It is interesting. When you get out of the big cities, you spend any time in the country, you start to realize how good the post office is and how vital it is in those smaller communities. And it's something I didn't appreciate growing up in Toronto, where you take it for granted. But you're absolutely right.